This summer was supposed to be filled with laughter, vacations, road trips, and camping trips under the stars. But for some people, it became a season they will never forget. A season where horror walked beside them in the most unexpected ways. These are 5 true stories from this summer that will chill you word by word, each one leaving behind a scar in the minds of those who lived them. The first happened to a group of 5 college friends who decided to go hiking into the mountains for a weekend. The first night was filled with firelight, laughter, and the feeling of freedom. But the second night, after the fire burned low, one of them awoke to a sound. It was faint at first, like crunching leaves under careful steps. He froze, listening harder. Then it came again, deliberate, slow. He nudged his friend awake, whispering, "Do you hear that?" Soon all 5 of them lay in silence, their hearts pounding. The footsteps circled their tents, coming closer, pausing right outside before moving again. One of them grabbed a flashlight with shaking hands and flicked it toward the woods. The beam landed on a tall figure standing just beyond the trees. He didn't move, didn't say a word, just stood and stared. For hours, he stayed there, sometimes fading into the dark, only to reappear in a new place, closer each time. None of them dared to move. When morning came, they left quickly, packing in silence. That was when they saw the ground. Heavy boot prints circled the tents again and again, stopping right at each zipper, pressed deep as if the man had bent down and listened to them breathing in the dark. The second story comes from a young mother named Sarah, who lived alone with her baby. To keep herself calm at night, she used a baby monitor. One evening, she woke to a faint whisper coming through it. She thought it was static at first, maybe interference. But then she heard it again. The next night, soft words she couldn't understand. She brushed it off until one night, the voice was clear. A man's voice whispered, "Don't cry, I'm here." She froze in her bed before running into her child's room. Her baby was awake, staring toward the closet, small tears on his cheeks. She searched everywhere, but the room was empty, though the monitor still crackled faintly in her hand. The police told her monitors sometimes picked up other signals. She tried to believe them until a week later, at 3 in the morning, the monitor turned on by itself. This time, the same voice whispered something different. "Good night, Sarah." It was her name. No one had ever said her name near that monitor. The third story happened to 2 brothers on a road trip across the country. Their car broke down on a deserted highway surrounded by fields. With no cell signal, they decided to stay inside the car until morning. Hours later, they saw headlights in the mirror. Relief filled them. A pickup truck pulled up behind their car and stopped. Its engine idled, the bright beams shining directly into their rear window. They waved, waiting for someone to get out, but no one moved. Then the engine cut off. The lights stayed on, but silence filled the night. The brothers whispered nervously. One said, "Why aren't they getting out?" The other whispered, "Lock the doors." An hour passed, then another. The truck remained, unmoving, its lights blinding. Exhausted, they finally drifted into uneasy sleep. At sunrise, the truck was gone. But in the dirt beside their car were footprints. They led from the truck to their car doors, circled around several times, then went back. Someone had walked right up to their windows, inches away from their faces as they pretended to sleep. The fourth story is about a woman who rented a cheap apartment for the summer. It was cozy, and she was excited at first. But soon, she noticed food disappearing, clothes shifting, and items going missing. She thought she was just careless until one night she woke to a sound. Slow, steady breathing filled her dark room. Terrified, she lay still, her eyes darting toward the closet. The door creaked open. A man stepped out barefoot, his movements quiet, his eyes not even on her as he walked toward the kitchen like he had lived there all along. She bolted from the apartment and called the police. When they searched, they discovered a crawl space above her closet. Inside were blankets, food wrappers, and some of her missing clothes. The man had been living there for weeks, slipping out only when she was gone, and even when she was asleep. The final story is of a family who went camping by a lake. They had been camping for years and thought nothing could scare them. But that second night, around midnight, they heard splashing in the water. The father shone his flashlight across the lake, expecting a deer. Instead, the light revealed a pale figure standing in the shallow water, motionless, its head tilted unnaturally far to one side as though its neck had broken. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, just stared toward their camp. They stayed frozen, too terrified to speak. Slowly, the figure sank into the water, slipping beneath the surface without leaving a single ripple. The family stayed awake until dawn, shaken beyond words. When they told locals the next morning, they were told a woman had drowned in that lake years before. Some people believed her spirit still lingered, wandering the shallows, waiting for someone to join her beneath the water. These were 5 of the scariest stories from this summer. Moments where normal nights turned into something unforgettable and terrifying. They remind us that horror doesn't wait for winter storms or haunted houses. Sometimes it walks in the forest, whispers through your walls, stands outside your car, lives above your ceiling, or stares at you from the water. Even in the brightest season, darkness finds a way to appear. This summer was supposed to be warm, safe, and filled with moments of laughter. But for some people, it turned into something far more terrifying. What I'm about to tell you are 5 stories, each one true, each one lived by real people. And if you listen closely, you will notice that none of these things happened in abandoned houses or deep dungeons, but in places we think of as safe: tents, cars, homes, lakes. The scariest part of all is that it could have happened to anyone. The first story is about 5 college friends who decided to go hiking into the mountains. On the first night, they sat by a fire, laughing, telling jokes, and enjoying their freedom away from the city. But on the second night, when the fire had died down and everyone was asleep, one of them awoke to the sound of crunching leaves. He thought it was a deer, but the sound was too slow, too deliberate. He lay still, listening, his heart beginning to pound. He nudged his friend and whispered, "Do you hear that?" Soon all of them were awake, holding their breath. The sound circled the tents, coming closer, then pausing, then starting again. One of them, shaking, reached for a flashlight. When he flicked it on, the beam revealed something that made them freeze. A man, tall and thin, stood just beyond the tree line, watching. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stared. They whispered frantically inside the tents, but none of them dared to step out. The figure vanished into the shadows, only to appear again in a new spot, each time closer. Hours dragged on until dawn. When the sun rose, They packed quickly, desperate to leave. That was when they saw the ground. Heavy boot prints circled the tents again and again, stopping at each zipper, pressed deep as though someone had bent down, waiting, listening to them breathe through the thin fabric. The second story happened to a young mother named Sarah. She lived alone with her baby and used a baby monitor every night. At first, everything was normal, until one night she heard faint whispers through the monitor. They were too quiet to understand, just soft noises. She dismissed it as interference, but the whispers returned every night, always at the same hour. Then one night she heard it clearly. A man's voice whispered, "Don't cry, I'm here." She froze in bed, her blood running cold. She ran into her baby's room. The child was awake, staring at the closet, tears rolling silently down his cheeks. She checked everywhere, but the room was empty. The monitor still hissed in her hand, carrying the faint hum of the voice. The police told her baby monitors sometimes pick up crossed signals. She wanted to believe them, but a week later, at 3 a.m, the monitor turned on by itself. This time the voice whispered something different. "Good night, Sarah." He knew her name. No one had said her name into that device ever. And yet, someone was whispering it in her dark, quiet home. The third story belongs to two brothers who were on a cross-country road trip. Their car broke down on a long stretch of deserted highway surrounded by empty fields. They had no cell signal, so they decided to sleep in the car until morning. Hours passed before the glow of headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. A pickup truck pulled up behind them. Relief turned to unease when the driver never stepped out. The truck idled for minutes, then the engine cut off. Its headlights stayed on, shining directly into their car, blinding them in the mirrors. The brothers whispered nervously to each other. "Why aren't they getting out?" one asked. "Don't move. Don't open the doors," the other said. An hour passed, then another. Still no one moved. The truck just sat there. Finally, exhausted, they locked their doors and tried to sleep. At dawn, the truck was gone. But when they stepped out, they saw footprints in the dirt. They led from the truck to their car doors, circled the vehicle, then returned. Someone had walked inches away from their faces in the middle of the night, checking if the car doors were unlocked while they pretended to sleep. The fourth story is about a young woman who rented a cheap apartment for the summer. She was excited at first, but soon she began to notice strange things. Food disappeared from the fridge. Cups she had left on the counter were gone. Clothes she was sure she had folded were missing. She thought she was forgetful. Then one night she woke to the sound of steady breathing in her room. Her eyes darted toward the closet. The door creaked open slowly, and a man stepped out barefoot, his eyes glinting in the dim light. He didn't look at her. He didn't say a word. He just walked quietly into her kitchen as if he belonged there. She bolted from the apartment, barefoot and panicked, and called the police. When they searched, they found a crawl space in the ceiling of her closet. Inside were blankets, food wrappers, and some of her missing belongings. He had been living in her home for weeks, coming out while she was gone, and even while she was asleep. The last story happened to a family who went camping near a lake. They were experienced campers, used to nights in the wild, but this trip was different. On the second night, around midnight, they heard splashing in the water. The father grabbed a flashlight and shone it across the lake. What he saw froze him. A pale figure stood in the shallow water, motionless, its head tilted unnaturally to the side, as though its neck was broken. The family sat in silence, unable to look away. The figure didn't blink. It didn't move. Then, slowly, it began to sink beneath the water. Not a splash, not a ripple. It just vanished under the surface. The family stayed by the fire until dawn, too afraid to sleep. The next morning, shaken, they told the locals what they had seen. That was when they heard the story. Years ago, a woman had drowned in that very lake, and many believed her spirit still lingered, wandering the waters at night, waiting for someone to join her. These 5 stories remind us that horror doesn't always live in haunted houses or abandoned asylums. Sometimes it waits in the trees around your tent, in the static of a baby monitor, in the glow of headlights on an empty road, in the crawl space above your ceiling, or beneath the black surface of a lake. Even in the brightest days of summer, darkness is never far away.